Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the final Uncut history of 2024. That's it. This is it. This is the last one for the year. Why? Well, because next Thursday will technically be January 2nd, 2025. And I have no idea what we're going to do once we get to 2025. Is that the end of Readout Productions? Do we call it a good year after 2024? I don't know. We'll see what happens. To be technical, I do have a plans. I am actually all Christmas Eve kind of just jotting out ideas. What can we do for next year? Certain videos have very, very lofty budgets and not for production value, for getting to the location, lofty values. So yeah, we'll figure that out when we get there. But for tonight, we'll look back upon 2024, and I've had a handful, and by handful, I've had one person send in a request for what we should talk about tonight. And of all people, that was Captain Garrett of the Swords and Starships podcast. He did submit in a viewer's request for tonight's subject matter. And, well, before we get into that, let's just talk a little bit about what did we do in 2024. So I was crunching the numbers, and I crunched the numbers on this tiny little note right here. Yeah, on this little note, that's where all my numbers went for the year. Yeah. Depressing, I know. Anyways, in all seriousness, in 2024, we actually ended up producing 35 episodes of Retracing History, which is 15 more than we did in 2023. So I increased the output of Retracing History. I was trying to have a goal of one video every week. I know that didn't end up happening, but if you factor in, we had a few other side videos, like I call them editorials. I don't know if that's the technical term for them, like videos, like the Chinese-American Steam Connection, those type of additional videos. So we probably did about 40, 41 videos for the year. Most weeks had at least one video coming out, and then I try to fill the gap with live streams. I think there was probably only maybe a month's worth of like weeks, if you collectively add it up, where we had dead air here on Readout Productions. So I think that's pretty good. I think that's a sign of progress. Although, man, my last few videos, especially if you're aware of the story behind the Valley Forge video, that was in developmental hell all the way back in March. That last video we uploaded yesterday to celebrate Christmas. That was our Christmas special. It was about Valley Forge. I filmed that in March, and then the stuff just languished on my hard drive. I did Brandywine in April, and then I lost track of time, and I didn't get to do the Paoli video until September. No, wait, August. I think it came out a month before the anniversary. And then the Valley Forge just sat there. And the reason those three particular videos sat for so long, the weather was appalling for myself and a humble collector. If you've seen the clips from those three videos, which are technically a trilogy, and I may one day assemble a playlist for them, it wasn't cold in the sense it was freezing. The problem was we didn't really pack for the occasion. The 2 weeks leading up were unusually warm in Pennsylvania, and we thought the next weekend was going to keep that going. And then the weather turned, and it was like 40 degrees in the day. But then once you threw on the rain and the wind, like the day we left Brandywine, we had like 50-mile-per-hour wind gusts. The day we were at Valley Forge, we had like 40 degrees, rain, 20-mile-per-hour wind gusts. It was not fun. It was accurate. It was accurate to give you the authentic weather. It was not a snowy white landscape, the Valley Forge encampment. It was a muddy landscape. So at least the photographs and the videos you see in the Valley Forge video, at least it looks accurate. But I was freezing to death. And if you're a member of our Garrison over on Ko-fi, you got to see the behind the scenes footage of those free videos being made. And yeah, you could tell I was, I think the cold froze a few of my brain cells, and I never recovered, truthfully. I never really recovered, I don't feel. But in any case, that was probably the most bothersome video like to produce the whole year. I'm glad I've made it. I'm not complaining. I wanted this. I set out to start the year to do a Philadelphia campaign series, and I did it. It just, I had to like make lemonade out of lemons, because I was like, well, what do I do here? Because we couldn't actually go and film. Like, we couldn't do what we normally do and walk in the locations, talk on the camera. We couldn't do that. because more than a minute outside the car, we were soaked, we were wet. We would have to, me and a humble collector are racing back to his vehicle to sit on the lovely butt warmers, as we affectionately call them, as seats have heated warm pads underneath. So we would get back in there, just blast the heater on, and we would just sit there for a good solid like 3 or 4 minutes before going to the next stop. It was truly one of the trips of all time. It will be remembered fondly for years to come. But with that out of the way, what is our feature subject matter tonight? Well, let me go over, get the Google. I got to plug in the Google Slides still. Yes, I forgot to do that before we went live. I was too excited. See the four. Okay, yes. We go for this every week, StreamYard. You have access. I give you access to my Google Slides, though you scare me every week because you act like, are you sure? Yes, I've been doing this for over, what, 2 years now, doing this on StreamYards? Yes, please share. All right. And what are we going to be talking about for? What did Captain Garrett send in for us to talk about today? Well, he requests us to talk about the invasion of Louisiana in the War of 1812, aka we're talking about the Battle of New Orleans tonight. Now, we could have waited another 2 weeks. I could have been mean and told the captain, no, we're not. We got 2 more weeks till the anniversary. We'll talk about that. But I mean, it is the day after Christmas. I'm in the giving mood. So we will actually talk about not just the Battle of New Orleans, but the wider campaign tonight. And boy, is it a rabbit hole to go down. So I think we're all familiar that there was a battle around New Orleans at the end of the War of 1812 between American forces led by Andrew Jackson and British Army. And I think we're all familiar that the Americans absolutely annihilated the British. This isn't even bragging. This is facts. But a lot of people are not familiar with the fact that this was a sprawling campaign. It was the final chapter of the War of 1812, even though neither Jackson nor the British commander at the time, Edward Packenman, neither of them realized this was going to be the end of the war. And Packenman didn't realize this was the end of his military career. And more on that later. So let's wind the clocks back a little bit to 1803 with the Louisiana Purchase. Wait, why are we starting a story of the War of 1812 and 1803? Well, it'll explain a lot why the British ultimately set their sights on New Orleans in the latter stages of the conflict. See, the Louisiana Territory is complicated, very complicated. Ever since the end of the 7 Years' War, that big global conflict between the allies of Britain and the allies of France, which Britain came on top of, whoever controlled the Louisiana Territory was always in flux. Technically, it was ceded to the Spanish, and the Spanish were supposed to maintain a joint ownership with the French. Yeah, that didn't work out well at all, especially having a Spanish governor over French people. Yeah, that didn't work. There were attempted revolts by the French to drive the Spanish rulers out. They didn't work out too well, but nobody was listening to the Spanish authority in the region. And by the time we get through the American Revolution, which, by the way, Spain and France were allies of the United States in, they tried to clean up the situation. Spain had control over the Louisiana Territory, but again, the United States of America entered into various treaties with Spain to have access to the Mississippi River and to trade out of the port of New Orleans. And then, of course, the French, they're the biggest population cultural wise. The French culture is to this day so highly prevalent in New Orleans. And then we get to the rise of Napoleon Bonaparte. And Napoleon Bonaparte views the Louisiana Territory as rightful property of the Kingdom of France. And he was going to initially go over and reassert dominance of this new French empire at the turn of the 19th century. He had whole plans to send soldiers over there to basically drive the Spanish out, drive any American traders out, and raise the French flag officially over the territory. Well, then all of Europe declared war on Napoleon, and he kind of had to forget about North America. Also, events such as the Haitian Revolution, a massive slave uprising that happened in Haiti in the late 1700s. Yeah, France really just wanted to kind of forget about North America and kind of like, we have priorities in Europe. We want to, we want to unify our holdings in Europe. Let's cut the fat over North America. And Napoleon Bonaparte decides to sell the Louisiana Territory to President Thomas Jefferson of the United States of America in 1803, which pissed off the Spanish because this was a violation of treaties the United States and Spain has set up. These treaties essentially forced the United States to recognize Spanish authority over the region. But Jefferson's like, hey, it's a good deal. We get this land relatively dirt cheap. So down went the French flag, up went the United States flag in New Orleans. The Spanish had no real way to wrestle control back over because they're embroiled in the Peninsula War by the end of the 1810s. And also, the Spanish Empire was completely imploded. Really, at this point, the Spanish Empire, was it really around? At this point, the last vestiges of the Spanish Empire are imploding. So, nobody was really happy in Europe with the Louisiana Territory. They didn't like that the United States just had gained the rights, just doubled their country, and especially the British. The British really did not like the fact that their former colonies were doing pretty good without British authority. And then, as the Napoleonic Wars transpire, you have the United States attempting to continue trade with both Britain and France, while Britain and France are at war with each other, and both countries start trying to place embargoes on one another. Both sides keeps telling the United States, you can't trade with that guy. You can't trade that guy. Well, who can I trade with? Nobody. Well, how are we supposed to make an income? Well, too bad. You shouldn't have declared independence, probably said King George IV. So, yeah, it's a whole mess. This leads to what was known as impressment of American sailors, although the war hawks in Congress of the United States kind of inflamed the talks of impressment, made it seem much more of a bigger practice than what it really was ongoing in the Atlantic Ocean. There were efforts to sort it all out, and actually, in many cases, most of the impressment situation between the United States and British navies had been sorted out. But in 1812, the Warhawks really wanted their war, so people in power, particularly those back in the James Madison administration, will push for a declaration of war. And here we go. The United States has just declared war on the British Empire, who are in the midst of the Napoleonic Wars. Oh, crap. And the United States really had no idea what it just gotten itself into. It sounded good. It sounded nice. We're defending our honor. Stop taking our citizens and impressing them into your service. Yeah, we just declared war on the British Empire at the peak of its power. Crap. And the War of 1812 commences, and it is a complete mess for the United States of America. What starts as simply as America's attempt to defend honor quickly turns into an attempt to try to grab Canada from the British. United States had the Warhawks in power in the United States had great envisions that they were going to liberate Canada from the British. And by liberate Canada from the British, I mean they burned the British capital of Canada down, which was then York, which is now Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Good to go in U.S. Army. Yeah, you did a really good job there. Oh, in fact, you did not do a really good job because now you're going to have the British forces, once Napoleon abdicates his throne, all of these reinforcements come over to strengthen Britain's war against the United States in 1814. You're going to have Commodore Cochrane going to make his way up the Chesapeake Bay. He's going to, well, before that, he's going to make his way up the Potomac River. They go up the Chesapeake Bay. Yeah, they go overland. My apologies. Yeah, they go up the Chesapeake Bay, go a little bit overland to attack Washington, D.C., burn the White House down, and retribution for the Americans burning York, Ontario down. Get back in their boats, keep going up to Baltimore, and it's only because of the defenses of Fort McHenry that why the Baltimore port is not absolutely eviscerated. There was also a lucky shot made by a certain American private at the British infantry commander of Cochrane's fleet. I think it was a General Ross, who was the British commander of the British infantry that was supposed to attack Baltimore. Lucky shot in a very small skirmish. Most of the Americans are quitting the field. The Battle of North Point, lucky shot kills Ross. Basically, one of the highest ranking British officers in North America dead in a skirmish, a small skirmish, which put the British in a bit of a predicament. While they had caused devastation in the Chesapeake Bay, they were not able to actually capture the crucial trade center of Baltimore. And then they fought about New Orleans and how upset they were at the United States and France essentially ignoring Spanish rule over the region. So the British High Command are going to send a replacement for the deceased Ross. That's going to be Edward Packham. who will be basically our main British figure of our tonight's tale. He's going to be sent to link up with Cochrane's British naval fleet, which is now moving out of the Chesapeake Bay, is going to move down for a refitting in the Caribbean, and then is going to make its way to New Orleans. And well, most people in the United States, they didn't see this happening. Most of U.S. Congress were so kind of in uproar after the destruction of Washington, D.C., and we're kind of getting on a high after the Battle of Baltimore. Like, yeah, we beat them back. We beat them British savages back. The war, we defended our honor. Well, there was an American general who had been fighting a very different type of conflict during the War of 1812. He's not fighting in Canada. He's not fighting out in the Midwest against Tecumseh's Native Confederacy that was backed by the British. I don't have time to get into that setup. That those are several streams for another year. That American general I'm talking about that's fighting a very different battle is Andrew Jackson. Now, Andrew Jackson, he really at this point had not been really involved with fighting the British. He had been involved with fighting a band of the Creek Nation known as the Red Sticks in the Creek War, which essentially was a civil war of the Creek people that was happening in present day Alabama and Georgia. The Red Sticks are trying to reject European and / American trade. They were trying to go back to older customs. Some of the Creeks backed Jackson. Jackson came in with this support to try to drive the Red Sticks and destroyed their influence over the region. This Creek War, which really should just be seen as a feeder of the wider War of 1812. That'll end at the Battle of Horseshoe Bend in summer of 1814. And since then, Jackson has been kind of starting to spar with the British a little bit. He actually, in was it around October, November, he's actually going to take charge of a small American force that's going to go into Spanish Florida. It's the only time really Spain gets involved with the War of 1812 directly. And it's really not so much to fight the Spanish, but to drive British authority out of Spanish Florida for like the umpteenth time. They always keep creeping back in there, the British. They keep trying to set up their control in Spanish Florida, but every time we got to drive them out. How many times we have to teach this to you, old man? Florida is America. No, it's not Spanish. It's American. That's probably what Andrew Jackson said. So Jackson had just gone done fighting the British at Pensacola, Florida, and he quickly sensed that there was a buildup of British forces in the Gulf of Mexico. He's definitely getting intelligence from his small force, from his connections in the Deep South. That, yeah, the British fleet, after they left Chesapeake Bay, now they didn't go back to Britain. They're down resupplying. They're planning for something big. And he presumes it's going to be New Orleans, knowing about all the prior baggage New Orleans carries dealing with American and British diplomacy. And if we could go back to this map a little bit, I can't hit the right button tonight. If we go back to this map here, you'll see partly why. If you control New Orleans, which for all of its confusing political history, and we're talking about just in the early 19th century, forget about today. That's a whole other can of worms I do not feel like opening tonight. If we look at New Orleans, forget about all of its different, its murky political background. If you control New Orleans, you essentially control the gateway to North America's interior, the Mississippi River Valley. This is a soft underbelly of the new United States of America. And Congress and most people up north have no real regard or no real scale of how important protecting New Orleans is at this point in time. And the British, licking their loons from the Battle of Baltimore, are more than happy to take a mostly undefended New Orleans. And who knows, they can push their way. They can push their way up the Mississippi River Valley, take the Louisiana Territory by force from the United States of America. Who knows what they can do if they take New Orleans? Not to mention, just in the city of New Orleans alone, valuable commodities that are piling in droves on the wharfs, because for the past 2 years, British blockades have made American trade out of New Orleans very difficult. So Jackson, he is going to relocate his headquarters from Pensacola, Florida, is going to move it down to New Orleans, Louisiana. And when he arrives in New Orleans, it's going to be early December of 1814. He finds the entire city is defended by approximately 400 militiamen. That's really it. The governor of Louisiana has been having a difficult time raising militias, and also has had a difficult time getting the Louisiana state government to approve funds for defenses. They just are not interested in it. It should also be noted that New Orleans is still reeling from the effects of a massive slave uprising in 1811, where hundreds of slaves were killed in retribution. So it's a very uneasy time, New Orleans, what Jackson is walking into. And also consider Andrew Jackson himself is a man who owns slaves. So he's walking into a very interesting situation where you would normally expect, okay, slave owners walking to New Orleans just come over a slave rebellion. You would think he's going to be siding with Congress. No. When Jackson arrives, he is freaking out at the lack of defenses that the people of New Orleans are doing. And he decides he is going to declare absolute martial law and is going to go about trying to use whatever resources he can to build an army to defend it. And that means recruiting anywhere and everywhere. And we'll get into a little bit more about that later. And Outright History pops in. Are we talking about the War of 1812? We are talking about the War of 1812. Of course, we're going to talk about tonight. I am a nerd for the War of 1812. And when somebody sends in a request to talk about the Battle of New Orleans, I don't say no, especially because I'm in a giving mood. I still got the Santa hat on. So we end up, it's December of 1814. Jackson's just arrived in New Orleans. He's horrified to find that the city cannot get its act together and raise in a sufficient defense against a coming British attack. They only have a few hundred militiamen. Jackson declares martial law. He starts using his powers as a general in the United States Army to start organizing a proper defense. And he's going to need to do this very quickly because on their way up the Gulf of Mexico, just now, they went down to the Caribbean, they got resupplied, they're coming back into the Gulf of Mexico. You're going to have Alexander Cochrane's British fleet, and numbers vary. He has at least 9,000 British soldiers, sailors, Marines on his fleet of ships that are coming to New Orleans. Now, attacking New Orleans, you'd think would be very simple. Well, you just go up the Mississippi River. Yeah, no, it's not that simple. So for all of I've been saying so far how unprepared New Orleans is in December of 1814, to their credit, the people of New Orleans are probably confident in their natural barriers deterring the British, and they're not wrong to have confidence in it. As you can see from the map here, you can see the actual Mississippi River. It doesn't just empty out into the Gulf of Mexico. It winds its way through a series of swamps and bayous before it reaches the end. So New Orleans is not a big ocean port, is what I'm trying to say. To go up to the Mississippi River, you have to go up this narrow channel surrounded by swamps and bayous. The alternative is to come in, attack New Orleans from the east, and you'll notice there's a large lagoon on the east side of the city of New Orleans. That is going to be Lake, how do we pronounce this? I want to say Borgne. It's Borgne. So I had an idea earlier tonight. I'm glad I didn't do it. Since we're talking about Louisiana, and I'm going to be straight up, I don't know much about the cultural history of Louisiana other than your basics. And everybody knows how horrible I am at pronouncing names. I had this idea that we would do a drinking game tonight where anytime I encountered a French name, I would take a shot of Old Overholt. But after 3 days of feasting on Christmas food, my brain told me, don't do it. Please, for the love of God, don't do it. Because the last thing your viewers need is to see you throwing up on stream live. Because there is going to be one too many names you're going to mispronounce. We just already know it. So I concede defeat. I am the worst pronunciation of words. I can't even speak the English language. I am a diehard Yinzer, can barely read English. We all know I'm going to fail at French. And if you've watched the Valley Forge video, you know Editor Chan beat me over the head about my von Steuben. Yeah, and I'm going to keep saying von Steuben. He's a German. It's von Steuben. Steuben, no, Steuben. Steuben sounds cooler anyways, but bludgeon me in the comment section about my mispronunciation. Spanish. And I failed almost everything to deal with the language in Spanish. The only reason I got through my Spanish courses was because I was the only person in class that did good on the actual cultural history about, Spanish culture. I was always great at history stuff in the language class, but the actual pronunciation part now is terrible. So the only reason I survived my class is because I was the only student that would get the cultural knowledge. So we're not going to do that drinking game. Maybe another day. Maybe another day. So Lake Born. That's what I'm gonna call it. Lake Bjorn. It sounds French that way. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing it. It's not even a true lake. It's a lagoon because it's open to the Gulf of Mexico. And the British had bounced around ideas. Do we go up the Mississippi? There was a talks about actually going up Mobile Bay in Alabama and then going overland to attack cut New Orleans off from the north and then lay siege to it. But ultimately, Alexander Cochrane and Edward Pakenham, who's still on his way to take charge of the British infantry of this attack, they decide they're going to land the forces in Lake Bjorn. And unfortunately for Andrew Jackson, Lake Bjorn's naval defenses are virtually non-existent. There is a half a dozen gunboats that are left over from the Jefferson administration after the Louisiana Purchase was made. It's a paltry defense. It's all he has to work with, however. So this is going to bring us to, if I can pull my notes up right. This is going to bring us to, yes, this will bring us ultimately to December 14th, 1814. And before we continue, these are our two lovely commanders for the evening. Of course, we know the man on the left, that's Old Hickory. The man on the right, that's Edward Pakenham. I keep messing up. How do we pronounce it? It's weird how it's spelled compared to how you want to pronounce it. So I've seen people spell like literally Pakenham, but most of the official spellings lack the C. So yeah, Pakenham. Edward Pakenham. May not know who he is. Well, he's a major general in the British Army. He is a veteran of the Napoleonic campaigns, particularly the Peninsula War in Spain against Napoleon. He's actually the brother-in-law of the Duke of Wellington. And so, and contrary to popular belief, he is not a nincompoop. He has a very long legacy in the British military. He's praised by the Duke of Wellington and other peers. It's not just biased by, hey, it's my brother-in-law, I like him. No, Edward Pakenham, he has got a pretty good reputation in the British military. So here comes a veteran of the Napoleonic Wars coming over to North America, because up until like 1812 and 1813, the British treated the war in North America as their farm league, really to train their up-and-coming officers before they go off and fight Napoleon back in Europe. After Napoleon's abdication for the first time in 1814, you're going to start seeing much better leadership from the British make their way over to North America, which really puts the Americans in a dire pickle. The United States of America had been fumbling the ball with the War of 1812 since the get-go, and it just got worse once you start having veterans of the Peninsula War coming over to attack them, as seen by the attack on Washington, D.C. and the Battle of Baltimore. So here we are, December 14th, 1814. Yes, everybody thinks the Battle of New Orleans is just one battle. It is not. It is a full campaign with naval operations, infantry attacks, and combined attacks with both the Navy and infantry working it out. Here it is. It's a naval action in Lake Bjorn. You're going to have 42 British sailors and 42 rowboats with over 1,000 British sailors and Marines helming them. And you can see them in the foreground there, those boats. Those are the British rowboats going after the half a dozen gunboats the U.S. had to defend the lake. You could probably figure out where it's going to go, but the small little American flotilla, which is going to be commanded by Lieutenant Thomas Catesby Jones, is going to try to make a valiant defense. The American Navy is outnumbered 4-1 in this situation. And while most stories about naval warfare in the War of 1812 tend to go with the Americans, oddly enough, in this situation, the British have an enormous advantage. The reason the British are attacking with rowboats and not their main warships comes down to the fact of the depth of Lake Bjorn. Some of these ships are just not able to easily... I can't tell what type of... I just heard a truck drive past. I'm like, it ain't a snow truck because there's no snow out right now, nor tomorrow. It almost looks like a fire tanker, but no like flashing lights or anything, just loud noise. Oh yeah, we're talking about the Battle of Lake Bjorn. So the Battle of Lake Bjorn. Here it is. It's going down. The reason the British cannot bring their large ships quickly in to attack and would just wipe out the Americans is because of the depth of Lake Bjorn. They got to be a little careful. They don't know the depths of the waters just yet. So it's 1,000 British sailors and Marines on rowboats going toward these few American gunboats. It is truly one of the naval battles to ever occur in American history. Jones, as well as the British commander in this event, a guy by the name of Lightyear, both of them are wounded. Jones will become captured. Most of the American forces are captured. Just about all the gunboats the U.S. have fall in the hands of the British. But it does eat up a few hours in the British making their landfall on the shore of Lake Bjorn. But December 14th, 1814, this small naval action is a British victory. While this has all been going on, you may be asking, what is Jackson up to? Because I told you that Jackson, when he walks into New Orleans, there's really nobody around. Well, he's calling anybody and everybody out to enlist in the defense of New Orleans. Now, he's already has a small U.S. regular regiment in New Orleans. I want to say it's the 44th Infantry Regiment. If I'm not mistaken, the 44th were actually based out of Louisiana. I could be wrong on that, but I know the 44th are involved in the campaign, so he's pulling on them. He's also pulling on the 7th U.S. Infantry Regiment, which was recruited from Kentucky, and they've been fighting the War of 1812 up in, well, Kentucky in the Midwest. Oddly enough, earlier in the war, Zachary Taylor commanded a company in that regiment, but he's not present for this battle. No. We only have room for one president, one future president in this battle. We don't want to get Taylor involved. You have your time, Mexican-American War, manifest destiny. It's coming for you, Taylor. It's coming for you. Anyways, so you got these two U.S. regular army regiments to make the backbone of an ad hoc army. Most of Jackson's force is going to be militia. This is eventually going to be filled by initially men from Tennessee, but eventually men from Kentucky will also fill these ranks. These are your supposed coonskin cap, squirrel gun carrying men. They probably had something a little bit more sophisticated than that, to be honest. A lot of these guys are actually veterans of prior campaigns in the War of 1812, so they may not have the best discipline, but they definitely are walking in with some prior experience fighting maybe British soldiers, more commonly probably Tecumseh's Confederacy farther up in the Midwest. So you're going to have your Kentucky and your Tennessee militia that's coming down to meet up with Old Hickory again. They're mingling in with the 7th and 44th Regiment of the U.S. Regular Army. And then you're going to start having freed colored battalions being raised and joining it. That is right. Jackson is going to offer a paid service to black soldiers in his ad hoc army, which is highly controversial in New Orleans, especially after the slave revolt had just gone down. But Jackson's like, look, do you want your city defended? You got all these people that are more than happy to take up a gun and defend it, even after a few years ago you were murdering hundreds of their kin. So I would suggest you just let me pay these guys. They're probably pretty decent soldiers. Or I could just let the British do to your city like they did to DC. So you're going to have these freed colored battalions that are going to be formed. And then probably the most famous ally Jackson's going to get for his defense is going to be a guy by the name of Jean Lafitte. Yes, time to talk about Jean Lafitte. And a horse, swords and starships. We are talking your request. We are talking about the Battle of New Orleans, actually the whole Louisiana campaign. And Wrangler has joined us in. Thank you. Thank you for joining us in tonight for this end of year wrap up. So we just got done talking about the Battle of Lake Bjorn, which I'm probably mispronouncing. British have taken Lake Bjorn. They now have an opening to land their infantry to attack New Orleans. Jackson's organizes his army. He got the regular regiments. He got the militia coming in, though they're not all there just yet. A lot of them are still in December. A lot of them are still making their way to New Orleans. He's calling upon the freed African population of I can't speak. The freed population of black people in New Orleans to join his ranks. He is going to also pull the resources of Jean Lafitte. Okay, I'm sure everybody's probably heard a rumor that Andrew Jackson enlisted the aid of pirates in the Battle of New Orleans. Is that true? Yes. Surprisingly, this is one of the myths that one of these big legends of the battle that actually turns out to be true. Pierre Lafitte, the brother of Jean Lafitte. So the truth is, we don't know much about the Lafitte brothers and their involvement in the Louisiana campaign. We know they're there, and we know that prior to the Louisiana campaign, both the United States and the British Empire were pulling for their support. The Lafitte brothers, they were operating a pirate ring along the right at the mouth of the Mississippi River in the Gulf of Mexico. They were raiding both American and British ships before the War of 1812, taking all their goods and then, of course, selling it on the black market. They also were smuggling slaves across the Mississippi, smuggling slaves into Louisiana and then selling them into slavery. This was highly illegal. Both the United States and the British Empire were making strides at this point to actually stop the slave trade, at least across the Atlantic Ocean, which sounds really weird. Or it was this very misguided idea that if they stop the Atlantic slave trade, it would also lead to the death of slavery in their countries. While that worked for the British Empire, it really did not work well for the United States because the cotton gin got invented right around the same time. And just because they couldn't get slaves in from Africa did not mean that they couldn't just trade them amongst themselves in the United States. And it didn't really have the effect that the United States, some of the politicians had hoped. In any case, Lafitte brothers, they were one of those folks. They were taking advantage of the situation and still smuggling people into bondage into the United States. So that's where they were making their money from, attacking ships left and right, selling off their goods on the black market. That included people that they were impressing into slavery and sending them into Louisiana, trade them away. The Lafitte brothers were also known to be very charming. They were, even though the Louisiana state government were constantly wanting to arrest them, they had so many friends up and along the Mississippi River Valley, they could hide out any time. So both the British and the United States actually approached the Lafitte brothers in late 1814 about, hey, bygones be bygones, we'll pardon you. If we pardon you, will you give us support with all of your munitions, all of your artillery, your manpower? We could really use it right around now. They approached the British approached Jean Lafitte first. And Jean Lafitte goes, that's interesting. Give me 2 weeks. And then he proceeds to go over to Jackson and tell Jackson what the British have offered him. And Jackson makes a better deal. And at that point, Jean Lafitte forms a shaky alliance with Andrew Jackson. And this is going to be highly important for Jackson's army because Jackson's, like I said, he's really kind of throwing this army together. Yeah, there's 2 U.S. regular regiments that make up the backbone of it, but in terms of the munitions and the manpower, he really needs a pull from other parts of New Orleans society to make this work. So now you're going to get artillery pieces. Big artillery pieces are now secured from Lafitte's pirates. So this is true. Now, in the forthcoming battles, we don't know in what capacity Jean and Perry Lafitte were involved with. Perry Lafitte, everybody's pretty confident he was at the final battle of New Orleans in some capacity. Nobody knows where Jean Lafitte was. So yeah, one of the big legends is actually true, but we don't know too much on like the details. What we do know is they provide Jackson with some, big guns. We're talking like 24 pounders here. Big guns. Going to become very important in the rest of our story. And speaking of story, let's get back to it. So he's raising this army. Jackson has raised this army after the British have made landfall in the Louisiana Bayou after the Battle of Lake Bjorn. At this point, as I mentioned, we have at least 9,000 British soldiers are going to be disembarking and going after New Orleans. That's jumping ahead of our story a little bit. Now, let's go back to the map earlier. So you can see Lake Bjorn there. It's the first lagoon at that very tight bend in the Mississippi River. The problem for the British is, okay, you made landfall. Well, you didn't technically make landfall because most of that land is marshlands and bayous. So they're going to have to, with the assistance of local fishermen, kind of feel their way through the Louisiana Bayou to try to find their way over to the Mississippi River. So then they know once they hit the Mississippi River, they have a direct route from south to north into New Orleans to attack. That's the hope. Now you have to imagine they're offloading on rowboats, bringing off on rowboats, men, supplies, artillery pieces. these rowboats can only even go so far up the bayous when then it's just marsh and slush, but it's too shallow to make a boat move in it. So then you're going to have to haul all this stuff. You're going to wade through this swampland. And it's December. So these guys are cold and wet as they're trying to maneuver piecemeal all of their logistics onto land. And it's really not going to be until December 23rd that lead elements of the landing force, which are going to be led by, I believe it's General Keane, right? To double check. Yeah, General John Keane, who's in temporary command of the British infantry. We know Packenham, he's going to be coming and he will officially be the British leader of infantry. But right now, it's under General John Keane in late December of 1814. So here we are. Keane's overseeing this piecemeal, painful, to be quite honest, painfully slow offload of supplies. And they eventually make their way up a particular bayou and eventually come close to the Mississippi River on what is known, I'm going to mispronounce this greatly. They're going to come out on the Villere Plantation. Villere Plantation. I am, again, probably mispronouncing that, but go with me here. They're approximately 7 miles south of New Orleans, where they come out and kind of make the connection with the Mississippi River. And that's in the early morning of December 23rd. Now, after waiting several days through the swamp and the bayous and trying to get this all to work out, the British are tired. And the vanguard of this force led by John Keane, Keane decides, okay, guys, let's just set up camp here. We'll wait a day, wait for everybody else to find us. So they set up their encampment there at the Villere Plantation. And they actually kick the guy out that's living in the large plantation house. Unfortunately, that guy goes running right into Jackson's army, and Mr. Villere tells Jackson exactly where the British vanguard is. And though we have over 2,000 British soldiers making landfall by this point, Jackson also got about 2,000 soldiers under his command. So we have two equal forces to oppose each other. And Jackson decides he is going to send the British a Louisiana greeting. So there's also a famous quote around this point that he says he's not going to, some along the lines that Jackson's not going to let British sleep soundly on Louisiana soil. So throughout the day, December 23rd, Jackson organizes his army as best he can, and they're going to advance out of New Orleans, and they're going to go down, and under the cover of darkness, they're going to actually approach the British encampment with the assistance of 2 gunboats, particularly the USS Caroline, which is partly being manned by some of Lafitte's pirates. So everybody's making their way down the Mississippi River. Literally, the gunboats are, and then you also have the infantry making its way down. And then it's around 6 or 7 p.m. on December 23rd at the Villere Plantation, where all hell breaks loose amongst John Keane's encampment. So it begins with a bombardment by the USS Carolina upon the Carolina. I can't pronounce tonight. I can't speak. I can't do English. I can't do anything tonight. You're going to have the USS Carolina open broadsides right into the British encampments, freaks everybody out because it's nighttime. They did not see this boat creeping its way down the Mississippi. And if they did, they probably presumed it was friendly. Next thing they know, you have artillery fire coming to your left, and then to your front, you start having musket fire erupt, and Jackson's American army just charges right into the fronts of these British soldiers, and it becomes confusion very quickly. The American right flank has a very good time cutting up the British encampments along the Mississippi River. However, the American left flank gets entangled with some of the British regulars. Particularly, I think they get entangled with the 93rd Foot. They could be wrong on that. They get entangled with the Scotsmen over in closer to the what do I want to say? They're in the woodlots, I guess. There's woodlots on the far side of the plantation. And at one point, there's both sides starting to fire into each other. It's complete chaos. Eventually, Jackson recalls his battle line back a little bit. He senses he's done enough damage. And really, this battle at the Villere Plantation is inconclusive. Casualty after 4 hours of fighting. I actually have the casualties listed on my notes over here. Oh, come on, notes, get in there. Between 7 and 11 p.m., the Americans suffer 24 killed and 115 wounded. The British, they suffer 46 killed and 167 wounded. So a little bit even casualties, albeit skewed a little bit, unfortunately, skewed more heavily on the British side. And this was mostly just to surprise the British, make the British realize, oh, we've stepped into it now. Make them think there's a larger American presence up the Levee Road in New Orleans and what there actually is. Not a lot of people talk about this first battle. I mean, really, well, yeah, the Battle of Lake Bjorn, which nobody talks about, that the whole Louisiana campaign opens with a naval action that involves the British in rowboats attacking American gunboats. It's wild. And then we have a night action, a rare night action. People do not fight at night in the 19th century. I know I've harped on that many times. And the reason is perfectly explained here at the Valeri plantation. It's nighttime. You can't see where you're going. Friendly fire ensue very quickly. And you can end up causing more harm than good before the day is over. But it was a risk Jackson had to take as he was still bolstering the size of his army, and he needed the British to second guess attacking New Orleans just yet. So, what's going to end up happening is after this night attack on December 23rd, Jackson's going to pull back his forces a few miles. Eventually, he's going to settle about 4 miles south of New Orleans, uh, parallel to a canal. And now, what you need to understand is the land south of New Orleans at this time is divided into nice square rectangular plantation plots. So we have the Valeri plantation, then a few miles up the Mississippi River, we have the Chalmette plantation. And it's just north of the Chalmette plantation, which is northern boundary is marked by the Rodriguez Canal, where Jackson is actually going to make his last stand to defend New Orleans. And it is a fantastic defensive position. You have the Mississippi River on his right flank. And then you have this canal, which is about 4 to 6 feet deep already. You have this canal that's just used for irrigation running about 600 yards to your left flank, where it kind of disappears into the cypress swamp, which is heavy cypress swamp trees, very hard to navigate through. Nobody's going to be outflanking you from the left. And while you could have the enemy try to cross the Mississippi River and outflank it to the right, that's also going to take some time. It is a phenomenal defensive position, and Jackson takes full advantage of it. His men, he's going to start employing his soldiers in digging deeper into the Rodriguez Canal, piling this wet clay up into an earthwork. Eventually, you'll have from the bottom of the ditch the whole way to the top, you're looking at about 7 or 8 feet there. So you're making some temporary but very formidable fortifications being held in by wooden planks and staves. Then you're going to bring in a very hodgepodge artillery. Some of this is U.S. regular artillery. Some of this is Lafitte's heavy naval guns. The USS Carolina is actually going to end up getting attacked by British forces after the night attack. And before it can be destroyed, Lafitte's pirates are actually going to pull those guns off, so Jackson can repurpose them on battlefield. So you're putting giant naval guns on a battlefield. Not going to end well for the attackers, is what I'm trying to say. And by Christmas Day on December 25th, 1814, William Packham has finally arrived to become the official commander of the British forces. So, he supersedes John Keane in command. And Packham, he is going to actually send a sortie forward to see what his opposition is. Because, he's just arrived. He doesn't know what he's actually up against. And it's around, I think it's like December. It's December 28th, according to my notes. Packenham, he is going to launch these sorties across the Chalmette plantation, which is just south of the Rodriguez Canal, just south of Jackson's line of defense. And he quickly realizes he's in trouble. While he's able to drive off American pickets, the Americans, as they evacuate across the fields, they're going to set fire to the Chalmette plantation buildings so the British cannot use it for a defense. And then they start breaking open the levees and start flooding the fields in front of the Rodriguez Canal, and at least like a good mile or so going back down toward the British encampment, which, yeah, not, it's going to make that a very sticky march should you try to attack the Rodriguez Canal. So William Pakenham has to figure out what he's going to do next. He can't just advance. If he tries to do that, it's going to be suicide. So he's going to have a council of war with all of his commanders, such as Alexander Cochrane, who's in charge of the naval fleet. He's going to meet up with John Keane. He's going to talk with a General Gibbs, who's going to be very important in our story shortly. He's going to meet up with John Lambert, who's in charge of the reserves for the British Army in this campaign. They all meet together and figure out, okay, we can't go across that field right now because it's completely flooded, but hopefully in a few days, the river level, it's going to all empty into those fields. It'll bounce out and it'll all, get saturated to the ground and be a little bit better to cross. Until then, let's see if we can just smash the American defenses apart. And on New Year's Day, 1815, that is what Pakenham tries to do. He sets up several artillery batteries, 700 yards from the Rodriguez Canal, and starts pounding the American position with artillery. Or so he thinks. There is a slight tilt to the topography. It's not really easy to make out even today, but on the Chalmette plantation where these artillery positions are on the south end of the Chalmette plantation, they're actually lower in elevation compared to the American guns that are behind the Rodriguez Canal. So, and since they'd and the way they'd kind of gauged them and everything, most of these shells were flying over the heads of the Americans and hitting buildings behind them and probably causing some havoc to the encampments. But to the actual defenses, they weren't doing too much. Jackson's going to order for his batteries to return fire. And those guys, too, they don't do too much damage. Part of the problem with the American batteries in this campaign, they are very limited on their round shot supplies. And round shot, of course, I'm talking about literal cannonballs. And that's the main purpose of a cannon. At long range, what cannons are meant to do, they're just meant to break through things, break obstructions, break through lines of men in the distance. They don't explode. Cannonballs do not explode, contrary to movies. That is what your howitzers and your mortars are for, which are never shown in movies for some reason. Howitzers and mortars fire exploding shells. Cannons fire cannonballs. Cannonballs, there's no did I say shell or explosion? No, I did not. But he's pretty low on his round shot supplies. So that means most of his artillery is mostly just making noise. They're throwing more so canister shot than anything else during this campaign, which is lethal at close range, but at far range is not going to really do much. It only goes 100 or so yards. So we have this artillery duel on New Year's Day. It makes a lot of noise, doesn't really do much to each other's lines. I also found in the resource I was pulling from, apparently during the artillery barrage, there is a lucky shot by the British on the American defenses, and it does expose that within the earthworks, there are cotton bales, which is another part of the myth of the Battle of New Orleans, that their defenses were made of cotton bales. And while it is true, there were large stores of cotton bales on the wharves in New Orleans that were having a hard time being sold to international markets because of the British blockade. There is evidence that they tried to use this in the defense, but during the artillery bombardment on New Year's Day, this lucky shot actually caught it afire. And after that, Jackson basically went, okay, yeah, cotton bales, not a good idea to put in defenses because they're very flammable. Don't do that again. So while there was some degree cotton bales being used to shore up these defenses, at least after the New Year's Day's bombardment, they called off that no use of cotton bales after New Year's Day is what I'm trying to say. So the bombardment did not work for Pakenham, and he's going to now try to figure out what he's going to do next. And while he tries to figure out what he's going to do next, unfortunately for Pakenham, more reinforcements are arriving for Jackson. Some 2,000 Kentucky militiamen are going to make their way in New Orleans beginning January 4th. It also should be is important to note this time, Jackson, with his martial law decrees, he basically has carte blanche over all resources in New Orleans, sending them all to feed his men. Pakenham is having a very difficult time to feed his men. His men have been in the swamps for several weeks now. To get any supplies, it has to come off a boat, by rowboat into the bayou, until you can't get that rowboat any farther. Then it has to be carried by foot through marshy lands to the Villere plantation and then sent forward to the front lines. And of course, you're being fed from a naval fleet, so they have a fixed amount of food on those ships for the infantry. So time is running out for Pakenham to make a swift move on New Orleans. And it seems by January 7th, he has gotten restless and decides he is going for broke. This is going to be his big final push to break through the American lines. Now, the plan for attack on January 7th that Pakenham is going to devise, and well, he plans it on January 7th, won't happen until the next day due to shenanigans. His plan is to require 3 columns to attack, 2 on the east side of the Mississippi, 1 on the west side of the Mississippi. The 2 that are going to be on the east side, 1 will hug close to the cypress swamp without falling into it. You don't want to go in there. That's no man's land back there. They're going to try to hug the cypress swamp and kind of fall a narrow, kind of a depression in the ground to try to block being exposed to some of Jackson's guns. So you have 1 column commanded by General Gibbs making its way up along the cypress swamp. The other is going to be clinging the levee along the Mississippi River, and they're going to be in a ditch adjacent to the levee, again trying to keep low from the American guns, and they're going to push toward the right flank of Jackson's defenses, which Jackson, worried that it's a little bit weak, he actually builds a redoubt in front of the earthworks, an additional layer of defense right there where the line meets the Mississippi River. The 3rd column is actually going to have to go across the Mississippi River. It's commanded by a Colonel Fortin. It's going to have to go across the Mississippi River to the west bank to neutralize a American battery that Jackson's put up there in the days after the bombardment. Jackson's getting very worried about his right flank, as you can see. So the problem with this plan is it's highly coordinated. It requires all 3 columns to move in sync and to move very quickly. And you can't do this once you pass daybreak. Why? Well, because you'll be in the middle of open fields in front of the American lines. So this all has to be done. 3 columns moving swiftly at right before daybreak, using the cover of hopefully some morning fog that'll come off the Mississippi River to conceal their movements. You probably can figure out where this is going, but you can see at this point, Pakenham has gone for broke. He is not going to let some militiamen stop him. Of course, as we know, there's more than just a few militiamen behind the walls. At this point, we got men from Tennessee and Kentucky. We got 2 U.S. regiments back here. We got freed colored battalions. We got freaking pirates. And at this point, we also got a small contingent of the Choctaw Nation, which some allies of Jackson that was in New Orleans merchant system was able to procure their assistance of. So it's said that basically he's having to communicate his orders for 4 different languages: English, Spanish, French, Choctaw. That's what Jackson's having to do to try to coordinate this ad hoc defense. I mean, it's truly a miracle it holds. And of course, we know what's about to happen. So that brings us to the events of January 8th, 1815. And well, it does not go well for the British. Early morning, Pakenham orders the general advance. You're going to have Fortin trying to wade his way across the Mississippi River with a few barges. You're going to have Gibbs making his way along the cypress swamp. You got General, I can't speak. You're going to have General Keane in charge of the attack along the levee. All of this is supposed to be coordinated, by the way. They do launch an opening barrage to try to, and at this time he has learned a little bit. I should give Pakenham some credit. He has learned tremendously from his New Year's Day's bombardments. Rather than a general firing on the American battle line, he is concentrating on where he sees batteries. He's trying to disable the American guns. The first movements are actually masked by fog, and part of Keene's attack column, which is led by a Colonel Rennie, is going to move very quickly. Actually, a little too quickly. The vanguard of Colonel Rennie's runs so far in front of the rest of Keene's attack column, they become separated. But Rennie, he jumps on top of the earthworks of that redoubt that's just in front of the American right flank. He and his men, they pour into the redoubt. There's fierce hand-to-hand combat. It actually drives the Americans out of the redoubt. So the opening moments of the Battle of New Orleans are going so far in the British favor. The problem is this redoubt is just one part of a much larger defense, which means Rennie's going to have to get his men out of the redoubt, go into the Rodriguez Canal, and then ascend the main breastwork of the American line. And it's in that Rodriguez Canal where Rennie is going to fall mortally wounded, and many other men are going to be killed at point blank range. Meanwhile, Gibbs's attack, which is going toward the American center, it's kind of trying to keep close to the Cypress Swamp, because anytime they go into Cypress Swamp, just some of Gibbs's men disappear, presumably because of the Choctaw, and some of them Kentucky and Tennessee militiamen just picking them off one by one when they go in the swamp. So don't go in the swamp. Very dangerous. You disappear when you go over there. So they're stuck out there in the clearing. And by this point, the fog begins to burn off, and the whole American battle line can see what's happening on the fields in front of them. Jackson has his lines 4 deep. 4 deep, keep that in mind. And you can imagine each line going forward, fire, steps back, over and over. It's an incessant volley after volley on the British. This illustration, which is based off of sketches taken by eyewitnesses, gives a bit of an exaggerated but a good idea of what's going on. In the foreground along the Mississippi River, you see Rennie's attack on the redoubt along the Mississippi River being stalled. Over in the background, you can see the tree line of the Cypress Swamp. You can see Gibbs's attack being stalled out there. And by this point, General John Keane, he's going to look over to his left across the Mississippi River. The American flag still flying over that redoubt that's on the far side of the river. So Colonel Fortin, where's his attack? He's wondering. He looks to his right. He can see through the smoke. He can see Gibbs's redcoats. They're stuck in front of the American defenses. And it's at this point where General Keane is going to start obliquing his column to go reinforce Gibbs. He decides, well, maybe if we combine our two columns together, we can punch a hole. We'll be powerful enough to just overwhelm the American line. This oblique is the moment everything falls apart for the British, because now you have the 93rd Foot, one of the most well-disciplined regiments in the British Army. Again, veterans of the Peninsula Campaign. They have high discipline, too much discipline, in fact. They start obliquing. Their left flank is racked by gunfire by the whole length. They're turning around, facing their left flank to the whole of the American battle line. And then officers begin getting shot down. When the officers get shot down, there's nobody to give orders. And 93rd Foot, they're basically taught, don't do anything unless to be less instructed. So for as great as their discipline is, they just sit there and get shot to pieces. And Gibbs's attack can't move forward. Gibbs, he's trying to send orders first out to his subordinates. Subordinates are not responding. Gibbs is getting upset. Probably they're not responding because they're dead at this point. Gibbs calls for Pakenham to come up and kind of like rally his troops. Pakenham comes up and disappears into the smoke. Cohesion's breaking down all across the Chalmette plantation. And eventually, everything within a half hour, it's all over for the British. There's a depiction showing one of the Freed Color battalions fighting in the Cypress Swamp. This is showing some of the 93rd Foot getting on top of some of the breastworks. That's jumping ahead of our story. Most of the intense fighting is really over in a half hour on January 8th, though gunfire will continue for 2 hours. Jackson is going to notice as we get closer to midday, the American flag's not flying over that redoubt on the West Bank anymore. Colonel Fortin, though he was delayed, he does gradually break through the American picket lines on the West Bank of the Mississippi River and will overwhelm this battery that's isolated from the rest of the American line because of the Mississippi River. It's on that West Bank. It's about 400 Americans over there, commanded by a General Morgan, not Daniel Morgan, not that Morgan. And General Morgan's actually going to abandon the battery and fall back across the Mississippi River. So Jackson initially, his first response during the Battle of New Orleans is panic. He thinks he has just been outflanked, and he knows what that means, that the British can put guns up there and fire into his exposed right flank along the Mississippi River. And then he starts noticing that the British in front of him start withdrawing. And eventually he's going to get a letter from John Stewart. And I'm sure his first question was, who the hell's John Stewart? Where's Packham? Why am I getting a lowly officer giving me instructions from the British, no less? Well, because Edward Pakenham, when he went in to assist Gibbs's column, about 70 yards in front of the American breastwork, was killed. And when Pakenham was killed, command fell over to Gibbs. And Gibbs was mortally wounded. And then command fell to John Keane, who also fell wounded. So in a matter of minutes in the Battle of New Orleans, you basically had the free top command, the whole front chain of command, the first three commanders are taken out of action. Two are killed, one's wounded. And that meant Stewart was now in charge of the whole army. And well, the guy was overwhelmed. He is overwhelmed by all these your non-commissioned officers pouring into the camps, basically, freaking out what's going on. They're asking for different directions. And basically he did what he did best, which was just fall back. He didn't know what else to do in a situation. So in a half hour, the intense fighting of the Battle of New Orleans is at an end. Oh, my apologies. John Lambert, not Stewart. Why do I keep saying Stewart? Not that Stewart. So John Lambert, he's the fourth in the chain of command. He's overwhelmed by panic-stricken soldiers and officers falling back from the American earthworks. So Lambert orders a general withdrawal. He is going to start sending flags of truce over to the Americans, basically asking, can we get to a ceasefire? And Jackson's deal is, if you promise me that you're going to take all of your soldiers off the west bank of the Mississippi, then I'll agree to your ceasefire, which Lambert agrees to. He tells Colonel Fortin to get out of Morgan's battery, which infuriates Fortin because he's like, I'm the only guy that gained anything today. I actually did my objective while you guys got slaughtered. So he begrudgingly gives up Battery Morgan, falls back across the Mississippi to join Lambert and the rest of the shattered British army. Although there's so many flags of truces in the coming days that Lambert throws out to the Americans, and eventually Jackson has to give out detailed orders to his subordinates on when and when not to respond to them, because Lambert's really just trying to stall the constant artillery barrages Jackson's firing into the backs of the British as they pull back across the Chalmette plantation. Depending on who you ask, 30 minutes, 2 hours. The battle on January 8th, 1815, the official Battle of New Orleans, is a lopsided American victory. It is a butchery on a scale you do not see during the War of 1812. To put it in comparison, the British report, one of the British medical officials will later report 381 soldiers were killed in the battle itself, with another 477 being killed because of their wounds a few days later. There were also over 2,000 non-mortal wounds suffered by the British soldiers. So, was that 800 killed ultimately from the battle? Another 2,000 wounded. The American casualties, there's nothing to talk about. They do exist. No more than 50 men, and that's including killed and wounded. It is one of the most lopsided victories for both American and British military history. It's one of the most lopsided victories for the United States, one of the most lopsided defeats for the British. It is a military disaster. Ultimately, Lambert will eventually withdraw from the Chalmette plantation. He'll pull back through the bayous, and by the end of January, the British force have evacuated Louisiana. Louisiana is firmly still part of the United States of America. Now, after the Battle of New Orleans, in February of 1815, word is going to reach the United States of America that the Treaty of Ghent had been signed between British and American ambassadors in Belgium. Now, this treaty had been underway since September of 1814, and it essentially had both parties agreed that if we agree to this particular treaty, we'll go back to status quo. Borders will go back to how they were before the war. Nothing was lost, nothing was gained situation. This was one big mess that we'd all like to forget about. Now, there's a lot of people that say that the Battle of New Orleans was for nothing. That will say the Battle of New Orleans was essentially murder because it occurs technically after this treaty was signed by the ambassadors. The Treaty of Ghent was agreed upon December 24th, 1814. However, it would not go into effect until both governments ratified it. Now, the British were more than happy to ratify because they were so freaking tired of fighting. They would like to enjoy some peace after fighting Napoleon and smacking America's bum once again. But let's say the British would have somehow taken New Orleans. Let's say they were able to outmaneuver Jackson. Personally, in my opinion, they were not. I could, you know what? I'll put that in a poll. I got to put that in a poll. You know, where do you guys feel? Where do you guys feel the battle? Where do you think? What was the deciding factor of the Battle of New Orleans? What decided the Louisiana campaign? Yep. This is the boring part where I make a poll, but then you get to interact. Battle Lakeborn. All right. I wish they would give me more choices. So there you go, chat. Decide yourselves. What was the deciding factor in the Louisiana campaign? The initial naval attack, the Battle of Lake was it Bourgenay? Yeah. The Battle of Lake Bourgenay, however you want to pronounce that naval fight in the lagoon that though the British won, it did delay them a day in landing. Did the night attack that Jackson made on the Vallery plantation, did that shake the British out of their wits? Did a New Year's Day bombardment prove that the whole, I know it's dead air. I'm coming back. I had to type that out. Did the New Year's Day bombardment, did that should have been the moment that Pakenham knew he was not going to be able to break through Jackson's lines, or was it the Battle of New Orleans itself to decide it? There you go in the chat. We had fun with that doing the battle in the Nashville campaign where it's lost. Decide where Pakenham lost the Louisiana campaign. So let's say the British got there earlier than into the. I can't speak now. Yeah, we're 1 hour in. I'm going off the rails. You know what always happens. So the Treaty of Ghent. What happens if the British are able to sweep by Jackson before he can make a proper defense and takes New Orleans before news gets to the United States that, hey, this thing was passed? Probably nothing. That is the unfortunate truth. The British would have to have very possibly had to relinquish New Orleans again, go back to status quo. That would mean, get out of New Orleans. However, it would definitely put into question the legitimacy of American ownership of Louisiana Territory. Because, the only reason the United States have it's because, the treaty told them they had to give it back. They couldn't defend New Orleans. So the fact that Jackson successfully defended New Orleans proved to the people of Louisiana, people of New Orleans, and the people all throughout the United States that, no, this is definitely ours. We defend it with our blood. You couldn't break through. Don't come back again. So that's the big deal about the Battle of New Orleans. Regardless of the outcome, yes, the border's got to go back to status quo, but this legitimized Louisiana territory actually being American territory in the eyes of not just the United States, but on a world stage as well, because it was under much dispute before then, as we talked at the start of the stream about the controversy over who actually controlled Louisiana in the 18th and early 19th century. So it was legally allowed to happen. Yes, they had signed the treaty. First of all, nobody had known any of that. That information not transmitted. And second of all, even when word arrived, it was like, well, the war doesn't end until we ratify it. And it didn't take long in early February of 1815 for Congress to ratify this and for James Madison to sign into law and basically say, the war is over. And we won! Oh, yes. Oh, don't you think the Warhawks did not take advantage of the Battle of New Orleans happening? Because up to that point, the war was not really was definitely falling out of favor in the United States. It just caused nothing but dismay, destruction to the country. Then one of the biggest victories of the war happens. It's the most lopsided victory of the war, at least in the United States' favor. Now they can manipulate the newspapers, make it sound like a big victory. Yeah, basically. Yep. New Orleans sent an important message. Don't come back. And they never did. This was it. New Orleans, Louisiana Territory was officially the United States. Nobody was going to mess around with the United States. Well, till 1846, but that's a story for another day about the Mexican. We never done a Mexican American War stream, have we? We probably should someday. So that's the Battle of New Orleans, the last battle of the War of 1812. It's more than just one battle. It is a whole campaign. And no, it was not in vain. Yes, the borders, New Orleans would have remained in the United States' hands regardless because of the Treaty Against Status Quo Declaration. But this battle made New Orleans legitimately part of the United States in the eyes of not just Americans, not just of Louisianans, but in the eyes of all of the world. And for that reason, the United States will control trade over the Mississippi River Valley to this very day. And of course, the United States will continue west. So that's why the Battle of New Orleans is very important. And thank you, Captain Garrett, for selecting it for our topic tonight. My voice is shot. I need a drink of water. With my water. Water. Yep, we need some water. Yep, we need water. I did formally include that, but there was a lot of, to my knowledge, there was a lot of smaller term deals being made in both legislatures to appease that before the war even happened. Uh, but by 1812, the let's just say the Democratic Republican machine was rah 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 war. It was getting pretty fierce on rah 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 war, and they wanted their war of Britain because you had a lot of these guys there, a lot of younger guys that really wanted their version of the American Revolution. They really just wanted the pride of it and say, look what we did. We kicked the British again. And we're using the impressment as basically legitimized over the reason we need to go to war with Britain and show who's boss. But yeah, there was actually a lot of, I want to say there's like one bill that was trying to solve the matters, but there was a lot of stuff happening in both governments before the war declaration. It was trying to amend the problems, but once you get a snowball rolling, sometimes you can't stop it. And that's what really led to the cause of the War of 1812. And once they declared war, they didn't realize what that really meant. And I think there was also a lot of, while they didn't necessarily declare it when they first went into the war, a lot of people in power in the United States really, really wanted Canada. Really wanted it, but it didn't sound good to say, we want to conquer Canada. It sounded much nicer once the war began to say, we are coming to liberate you from the British aggressor. It sounded a lot nicer. And it did not work well at all in America's favor. There's a lot of American people, a lot of Americans died in the attempt to conquer Canada. Did not work out well. Did a whole video about that a number of years ago, the Battle of Lundy's Lane. It's considered the bloodiest battle of the War of 1812, but you saw the number. It doesn't compare to the freaking numbers of the Battle of New Orleans. It's just so lopsided, this battle. This was just brutal. Oh yeah, Attack of the Chesapeake. I'm something of an 1812 historian myself. We need a better name for the War of 1812, don't we? I like the name, but that should be the next poll. That should be the next poll. If once for don't forget, folks, there's a poll going right now. You too can vote on what the side of the Louisiana campaign. I'm guessing everybody's like, why would we vote? We know what the answer is. All right. While we're doing that, what else do we have on this? The things. The things. Boy, I don't know why after talking about that. I'm a little whipped. We can always have fun and dive into the comments section from this past year. Earlier in the stream, I'll say it again. If you're wondering what our record was for videos we posted, I don't know the full video number, but at least for Retracing Histories, we did 35 episodes this year. In the year of 2024, we did 35 episodes, which is 15 more than the year of 2023. So we're making progress. We are making progress. It's the only war the youths can name when it happened. Basically, yeah, they're like, the War of 1812, because we don't have another war, except that one war and that other war. There was a lot of wars before the War of 1812 that they lived through. But yeah, to them, it was like the only thing that happens. Like, yeah, but this one we fought the British, so it counts. We don't talk about the wars in the Northwest Territory. They don't count. They're not fun. All right. Oh, boy. Let's see what I can dig through. Yeah, I'm fading fast, guys. I'm sorry about that. I got through it. I'm like, and we hit the notes, and now I'm gonna go to sleep because the 3 days of Christmas food's hitting me. Pretty quiet Christmas this year. Yeah, it's part of the problem was this year doing Christmas, how it landed in the middle of the week. So everything's all messed up both this week and next week in terms of schedules at work and stuff. Like you go to work, but then you have like the holidays in the middle of the week, which is nice. You get the day off, and then you got to go back. It's not like you get an extended, I like the extended weekend stuff, not the middle of the week must stop what you're doing. Okay, go back to work. It's like, but I just got here. So yeah, if like for I'm working personally, we were closed, for Christmas, and then we're going to be closed next week for New Year's. It's just going to screw everything up in terms of delivery and offloading stuff. It's going to take a few weeks for everybody to get back in the groove of things. I did look to see what was the most viewed video of 2024. And the most viewed video of 2024 was just talking about this year alone, was Death and Rebirth of the ambitious T1 locomotive. Yes, that controversial, because it's controversial apparently. That controversial retracing history from back in May where we talked about the T1 locomotive. The comment section, it took on a life of its own. Let's yeah, I could actually go over and look at that. It was a very scary comment section to be. I'm still sometimes, because people really didn't like and I don't like it myself. I kind of cocked it up where I was essentially trying to explain in layman's terms the operation of steam locomotive, just so we can go into the duplex idea, so we could build upon that. And instead of saying what I should have said, which was, boiler turns water into steam, steam goes into the cylinders, where in the cylinders the pistons are, so the steam pushes on the pistons, which turns the valve gear back and forth, and the valve gear decides the timing of the force from the pistons over into the driving rods that are connected to the driving wheels. I kind of just broke it down to steam goes into pistons, piston pushes valve gear, and everybody lost their freaking minds. Like everybody did. Like to this day, it's like, no, you forgot to mention the driving rods and forgot to mention the gear shaft. I know. But in layman's terms, I'm not wrong. I know you guys want to say I'm wrong, but also sometimes some people get a little too nitpicky. It's like I'd be happy to make a whole video on how a steam train works, but there's 15 million of them already. So yeah, people really didn't like how I broke down how steam locomotive works. And I meant it wasn't the full, I meant probably wasn't the best way to describe it. Should have kept going with talking about how the valve gear is tied in with the driving rods and stuff like that. And how the valve gear is more about timing out the steam motion from the pistons to the driving rods. But people didn't like it. Everybody burned me about it. And then you just had some people that apparently just really don't like historical preservation, would just get on there and go, actually, they're not going to finish this. And I'm like, dude, it's 50% done. In terms of what tonnage, they've completed 50% of the locomotive. There were people just like, nah, it's not going to happen. You people just don't have fun, do you? You came on here and you don't want to get it behind something and support like this good movement. You just want to say how it's awful and it's not going to do anything. So yeah, that was an interesting video. It was the most viewed. I still had fun doing it. I loved going out to see the frame of the T1. To go out to see the T1 Trust. They're doing a wonderful job. I'm looking forward to being able to document them in the coming years. I'm sure they'll be at future events. I'd love to keep up tabs on their progress on bringing that locomotive back to life. So yeah, that was a lot of fun. But yeah, I'm like going through and somebody did propose. I'm going back for the comments on the T1 video. Somebody posted a pretty funny comment, which sums up that whole comment section. Warning, rivet counters and bitter foamers below. Nothing like a rude bunch of know-it-alls to ruin a fun presentation. Yeah, that's basically sums up. Yeah. Railroad community on YouTube. It can be very, very heartwarming. And I've generally had great viewers. I've had a lot of great viewers from the train videos. Those have done the highest views consistently on the channel this year. A lot of cool stories. Actually, there was a lot of guys from the Chinese American Steam video They had a lot of good things to say, just about their experiences on the locomotives, which made me pretty happy if I can go over. But man, people got so vicious over me, basically oversimplifying the operation of steam locomotive. People just got so pissy. It was like, guys, I told you it was a dumbed down version. It probably wasn't going to make you happy. At least you proved me right. It didn't make you happy. Chinese American. Yeah, let me pull over some of the. I can't spell. It's too late in the day. I can't spell. I'm looking over here. I'm looking for now the Chinese American Steam. Yeah, there was a lot of good feedback on this one. A lot of people had a lot of good stories. There was a much kinder crowd than the T1 crowd. Also didn't help that I basically hypothesized the T1 locomotive may have been the fastest locomotive ever to operate, steam locomotive, and everybody's like, no, it's not possible. And I said, I didn't say it actually was. I'm just saying there's an account that claims it went at 143 miles per hour. I'm not saying it's accurate because they measured that off of like, they were counting like telephone poles or something, and they did some math through it, and the engineers calculated. I'm not saying that it's accurate, but I'm saying there was a claim, and it'll be fun to test it. And everybody's like, no, not true. Everybody them and they're freaking. Everybody's like, no, it can't go faster than British locomotives. Then you got all the anti-American. Oh man, the British locomotive crowd can be very, very pompous and self-entitled sometimes. Ours are better. We did it first. Yes, ours are bigger and better. It's just that simple. See, this is, yeah, me and my railroad videos have an interesting relationship because I get a lot of feedback from them. Some of it's good, a lot of it's not so good, and I can never please anybody. And it's just like, yeah, the locomotive crowds go hard, just on another level. It's just like, guys, God, it's like this is it's like, thank God I'm not like an automotive freak, or an aviation nerd or something like that. God, oh God, I would be in trouble then. I'm just a humble historian and I work off of my sources, and this is what my sources are telling me. I'm happy if you want to correct me. Just don't be a jackass about it, because then I'm just going to give you the silent treatment. Yeah, yeah, it's just like you make a video and you're having fun doing it, like, "Oh, this is like a different topic." You break into it and you're just like, "I want out of here as soon as possible. Where is the escape?" And you have you're the one friendly fan in that community, like, "Over here." There's the escape over there. Back to civilization we go. So yeah, I want to read some of these from the Made in China video because there was a lot of good stuff. Let's see here. There was a lot of comments here about people who apparently had worked on number 142, Susquehanna 142, which I was very appreciative about. Had several people, former volunteers. Some of my comments said here, I learned how to crew a steam locomotive on the 142, and now I am not allowed me to be able to crew the big boy sometimes. What else we got? Oh, it just said Zen's there. Okay. There was a really good story here, and I'm trying to find it. It was something about when they first. I can't find it. Somebody posted in here. At least you had to go. You had to take the comment at face value. But if it was true, it kind of was from a gentleman who apparently was with the Boone Scenic Valley Railroad when they got 8691. I can't seem to locate it. And I'm frustrated. Hopefully they didn't delete the comment, because it was a good story. It was just about them. And just okay, I'm gonna get out of that. I'm just getting depressed now. Let's stop looking at that. You asked a question earlier, Swords and Starships, and I'll answer your question. Did we win the War of 1812? Barely. I will say the United States barely won the War of 1812. I know everybody wants to say, well, there was a draw, or well, the British whooped their butts. Oh, the British destroyed much, the British destroyed a lot in 1814, did a lot of infrastructure damage to the United States when they came up to Chesapeake Bay. But there's a key chain of events that just tipped the war to make it a bit more of an American favor. The United States, of course, blunted the invasion at Baltimore. A very small American flotilla blunted, I think, what was the actual largest land invasion of the United States of America in the War of 1812 into upstate New York at the Battle of Plattsburgh. Not a lot of people talk about the Battle of Plattsburgh. And then, of course, you have the Battle of New Orleans. Oddly enough, though, the last technical battle of the War of 1812 was the Second Battle of Fort Bower, which protected Mobile, Alabama, which happened right after Cochrane, pulled out of Lake Bjorn and back into the Gulf of Mexico. He went back to Mobile Bay and he actually captured it. The last battle of the War of 1812 is a British victory. Yeah, it's like one of them. We fought the most powerful empire to a draw. That's not bad. Yeah, it's one of them. Like, I kind of consider that a victory, which if you look at the American Revolution in itself is a very similar situation. It's like we outlasted the biggest empire in the world. That was technically a victory. Any battle in the American Revolution that's a draw for the Americans is technically a victory because it just draws the war out and makes the British populace more unhappy with the war. But yeah, the War of 1812, I've always made the argument, is slightly an American victory. But yeah, I mean, tactically speaking, it's a draw. Nothing was gained. Nothing was lost. Well, nothing was gained. Many lives were lost. Let's just put it that way. And that goes for both sides. I mean, this one, the war had a lot of social impacts. If you want to, you want to get into like social and cultural impacts. That's where its biggest mark was. All of those battles that happened like along the Niagara front and in Ontario and in Canada had a big impact on the psyche of well, Canadians, who had already gone, these were ancestors of people who had gone through France's loss of Canada to the British. Now they're going through this American invasion of Canada and the British counterattacking. It kind of led him to make, maybe we need to be ourselves. Let's stop being British. Every time we keep getting stomped on. Ever since the British came here, all we've gotten is to get stomped on by invaders and by the British themselves. Maybe we just want to be ourselves. So the War of 1812, at least if you want to speak on cultural terms, very important in beginning the Canadian independence movement. Of course, War of 1812 really is the last, it sees the last major confederacy of Eastern Woodland people. After this, the Eastern Woodland cultures, they collapse. What I mean by is, of course, I know we have all the plains indigenous tribes and all those wars that'll happen throughout the 19th century. But when we're talking about Eastern Woodland, your tribes that were indigenous to east of the Mississippi River, this is their last major war to stop westward expansion. And they have some early successes. Tecumseh's Confederacy has some successes. And then once Tecumseh's killed at the Battle of Thames, that's really it. It all falls apart. So it's War of 1812, highly important to indigenous cultures in the United States of America. And the War of 1812 gave the United States of America a lot of cultural icons. National anthem, first of all. Yeah, that comes from that. Battle of New Orleans, this whole battle goes on and becomes its own legend. Of course, immortalized by Johnny Horton. Gotta love that song. I've thought about doing a video about Johnny Horton and his impact on historical preservation, just because all these songs that he produced over the years that are highly mythologized accounts of historical events, and that's the only reason people remember them. Like, I don't think anybody remembers about New Orleans other than the lyrics that Horton writes. All right. Ugh. Well, I think we're going to call it a night, guys. Sorry about, I'm sorry I'm losing steam on what was supposed to be our end of year celebration, but I guess the end of year it's just hitting me hard. Yep. First Grace Generation came out of that war. Yeah, there's a lot of people in the War of 1812 in their youth. There's a lot of people in their youth that are involved in this war. Maybe not in like large roles, but they're there. And then you're going to hear about them throughout the mid-19th century. Winfield Scott, he is going to be a brigadier general on the Niagara front during the War of 1812. And of course, he's going to have a very important career in the U.S. military. Starts with the War of 1812, goes the whole way for the American Civil War. It's crazy. And it could get into a pedantic argument of Winfield Scott. He won the Civil War for the Union. because he made the Anaconda Plan, that blockade of the South. He didn't do anything else in the war, but that was what he did. And that is what the cutoff of trade with the southern states is what ultimately strangled them. So you can always make that argument that who won the American Civil War? Winfield Scott. He sat in an office and drew a snake around the southern Atlantic coast and called it a day. It'll take time. I have no problem indulging people on the War of 1812. Now we are going to 2025, and frankly, I have no idea what we're going to do. It's going to be fun, I'm sure. I have a list of ideas. I don't know if I'll get to all of them. Some of them will be very fun to do. I will say that 2025 is a very important year for the United States of America. There's a certain event on April 19th. I would love to be able to go up and document. I don't know if I'll have the resources to do it. That would be an 8-hour car ride one way, or a 2-hour plane ride. I don't want to deal with TSA. And trains are out of the question. Amtrak will never get its act together. So there's a lot of things I want to do this year. We'll see if we're able to do it. Thank everybody who supported me throughout 2024. It's been the most successful year on the channel. Hopefully we can grow it bigger. And one way you can grow it bigger is before you leave tonight, hit the like button down below. Let the YouTube algorithm know. You want to be edumacated for social media. You don't want brain rot. You want to actually improve your knowledge through being on social media throughout the evenings. So hit that like button. It'll help us in the algorithm. And if you want to follow us in our future adventures, subscribe and follow us here on Redoubt Productions. We do have a video slated for early 2025. So let's hopefully see if I can cram get another video produced to start the year with. I know there's something coming out next year. I just don't know what'll be the first video. Thor Strong Cards. Thank you for all the effort and passion, brother. Looking forward to this year's content. It is going to be a blast. There's going to be a lot of different stuff. I think there's going to be a lot of new stuff. I think we're going to try some different formats. We'll see how things work out. So, and if you want to go the extra mile supporting us, you can go to our Ko-fi page, links in the description below, and you too can join the Garrison, our membership program with a small monthly fee, gives you access to behind the scenes footage, photographs, select scripts from past videos, and I'm hoping to build a few more bonuses for the Garrison next year. So links in the description below. Thank you guys for watching. I can't end the stream until I play the outro. Where's the outro? I don't know where the outro is. Is it this button? Is this the button I hit?
$10, a lot of money.
That's not the button we hit. It's not the button. Well, guys, thank you guys for tuning in tonight. We will see you next time on Uncut History.